Hey folks, it's Bear Gardner, and we are here with another edition of Cards Special Operations Executive, and it is time for the rotation for the newly announced winter expansion Homefront, and because this rotation is a little impactful in places, I thought I might grab some people whose faces you might recognise, lock them in the Cards SOE bunker until such time as we're done recording, and force them to give your opinions. And as it turns out, I'm lucky enough to know some fairly smart people. So, sitting down below on the screen beneath the shiny Homefront thing, we have Core. Core, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction to all of the folks watching?
Hey guys, I'm CoreData. As some of you may know, I make some content related to cards, occasionally doing deck techs and gameplay videos, as well as occasionally streaming over on Twitch. I'm relatively new in comparison to my two co-hosts here. Only been playing for what 7-ish months, but I like to think I have a relatively good understanding of the game. So hopefully I can give some insights. But I I don't know if I'm the most qualified person in this call.
That's okay, because on the subject of qualified people, I've also managed to grab JKing7. JKing, why don't you tell people who you are if they don't already know?
All right, I'm JKing7. I also do cards, YouTube, and occasionally Twitch. And I mainly focus on the competitive aspect of the game. So this is talking about decks and the best deck in the game and how to play them well as covering news that particularly affects people who play the game a lot. So news about balance, news about rotation, and news about tournaments and whatnot. And I've been playing the game for 6.5 years, so I've been around the block here.
Which is interesting, because that means in the 6.5 years that you've done it, you've won exactly 50% of the World's Championships, which you will never say yourself because you're far too humble. But JKing is indeed the threepeat Kards World Champion, and generally accepted by most top players to be one of, if not the best player that we have seen in the game. I'll say it because he's far too nice to do so. Guys, I am super, super grateful for you coming along and being part of this. It's going to make my life a little bit easier. In the interests of not taking too much of the poor human beings watching this time, I say too much because if you guys know us, we can all talk. If you check out the links down below, there are links to everyone's channels. Please go follow, like, and interact with everyone involved in this. I cannot stress enough at the moment how much the YouTube algorithm is being an absolute arse. And the more that you interact, the more that you engage with it, the more chance you're giving channels in a relatively small and niche world being made by passionate people a chance to actually grow. And it's kind of key at the moment because they've had a fiddle with the algorithms and it really does feed off interaction. So make sure you go and like these guys, catch them, and obviously get on board if they're ever streaming. They're always worth a one. Plus, if one of us is streaming, one or other of the rest of us is probably there because we sort of end up lurking in this weird Ouroboros circle of each other's content. Right, we are going to hop over to the spangly room over here, in which we have the actual rotation. So this is Homefront. Homefront is going to be the winter expansion. We are not in spoiler season. I feel the need to emphasize this because people seem to occasionally be expecting spoiler season to have started, and it hasn't yet. But what we have got is a nice early, in card scales, actually very early, announcement of the rotation. So, what the hell is rotation if you are one of the newer players who watches my content? So, the way Cards handles its package of available cards at any given time is to, instead of actually removing things permanently from the game, they have what's called a reserve pool. So, every time we have an expansion, some cards go into the reserve pool, and a few come back out, and then some new cards get added, and that way it stops the game from getting insanely bloated. And any card in the reserve pool can come back into the game, but it is important, particularly with this rotation, to remind people that cards coming back from the rotation pool are not guaranteed to come back with the same text and effects as they left with, and in some cases there are those of us, and myself and JKing will probably pick out a couple in this rotation of cards that we think probably won't come back with the same text that they left with, for a number of really good reasons. And the usual disclaimer, 2 of the 3 people in this conversation are part of internal testing, but we are professionals, we will not be violating our NDAs, so we're just going to chat about our opinions. You will not get the chance to hear any of what we may or may not know is coming in the new expansion. Sorry, not sorry, but we had to sign a piece of paper in 1939, have a very highly trained group of Icelandic ninjas that I don't want to be on the wrong side of. Right, so we're going to get straight into it. Let's start with Britain, because that's the way it is. We're just going to go down this the way that it appears, because I have not had time to pop all of these, and as a result, the first card that comes up is a returning card, and this for Britain is a limited card. This is the M3A3 Honey. This tank is a 2-cost, 1-op cost, 2/3 tank, and it says when you draw a card, your HQ gains +1 defense. This is a card that I am very familiar with. I know it's a card that JKing's very familiar with. I'm curious, Core, is this a card that you've ever had any real... Is this inside your window, or was this gone by the time you joined us?
No, this was still legal in Blood and Iron. It was actually rotated with United Front. So I have played a little bit with Honey. It was a solid card from what I understand. Very good in control. I think this is more. I think this is coming back as an appeasement, given how bad the the healing is in the game right now. I can't see this being changed. But yeah, no, it's a card I am familiar with. I'm excited to have it back, actually.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm pretty positive about having this back in the current meta. I've always been a Honey fan. And we've had some chats before, haven't we, JKing, about the history of this card, and it's had some different versions. You can always check the links for those. But how do you feel about the return of the Honey?
I'm very happy that it's returned. In general, I think just the game needs a bit more healing. And specifically, I think it's a lot more interesting to have healing in the form of units that can heal more or less depending on how you use them, rather than just cards like Fortification or Elf Infesting, where it's just an order that exclusively heals and you gain this much health when you play it. So I'm glad it's back. I kind of wish that Honey wasn't a British card, just because Britain was the one nation that didn't really need healing. Now nobody's playing Britain, but I don't think Honey's going to move the needle on that too much. But like Britain, you could run for naval power and for Fortification. If Honey was like just an American card, that would be much more interesting, I think, for the meta. But alas, it is British.
Yeah, I mean, it is fair. Honey's always been that weird one where it's always just been augmenting something that Britain has traditionally just done well anyway. I think it is healthy to see it back, if only maybe meaning that we might see, and again, consider the source, we might see some British decks that aren't air ever. Because even for me, as that guy, I would love to play some Britain control, or maybe even some Britain mid-range if we can see something in the new expansion to help lean Britain into a slightly more board presence way. Because recently, my nation been done wrong, because really the only thing we've been famous for is air, which, to be fair, I do enjoy, but is occasionally groaned at just because it's been around forever. And then there's Commandos, which we may or may not get to talking about a little bit in a minute, which honestly were sort of taken out the back and old yellowed during the last balance patch. But those are really the only things that have been oh, and Handlock, because that also gave Britain a positive reputation. Like, I feel like it'd be nice if my nation could maybe have a playable deck that everyone doesn't hate.
Yeah, I mean, you forgot to mention Ramp, but that's not exactly a deck that everybody loved.
I mean, again, it's sort of kind of... it's not really helping my case. But yeah, I mean, Britain has had that thing. But yeah, so let's hop away from honey, see what else is coming back. And we've got the Royal Ulster Rifles. So this is an infantry. This is an elite that is returning to the game. So Royal Ulster Rifles, and you'd be forgiven for not knowing this, is a 4-cost, 1-op cost 2/7 infantry with smokescreen. And it says, when your HQ is damaged, deal that amount of damage to this unit instead. So I'm gonna lead from the top. For me, it's a card. It's coming back. JKing, did this ever actually see play? Because I don't remember ever doing anything interesting with it.
It did see play in certain decks in 2020 and maybe early 2021, just because suppress wasn't a mechanic, and there was a lot of guards in Britain, and there was a lot of AoE unit health buffs. So you'd like play Royal Ulsters, and it would be protected by like 10 health of guard, and then you'd play like AoE, give all your units +3 health, and then you're adding 6 more health of guard on board, +3 health to your HQ, +3 health to this unit that's protecting your HQ. But yeah, unfortunately, it is not that good, because if there's any good aggressive decks, they just simply hit you for 7. And then you just played a 1-cost, additional cost fortification. Or worst case, they like hit it with a raid brigade.
Yeah. Cool. What about you? Do you have any saving graces as the new boy for this card?
I will say, I can't believe that you guys also have both Ram Shield in this game. That's crazy. I mean, it's a little bit more interesting now with Chain Home and Formidable being in the format. I will tip my hand a little bit and say that the deck I've been playing for the last week and a half has been a Brit Italy control list focused on Chain Home and Formidable, and it's been pretty solid. In a metagame with all where the primary means of interacting with this is likely going to be suppress. You don't care if this gets suppressed because you just Formidable it next turn and clear the board anyway. So I don't think it's going to be particularly good, but it is at least interesting. I am going to play around with it a little bit, and I mean, who knows? It might actually do something, but I doubt it.
I mean, I think it would be, honestly, part of me, and rarity doesn't change, and we've covered this a million times before, but this would be a lot more interesting if you could run more than one of them in your deck. It just feels very underwhelming for an elite, but of course, as we said at the top, it might come back changed, but I mean, if it comes back as it is, maybe.
I was looking through what other British elites are currently in the reserve pool for alternatives to bring back, because obviously they're going to bring back a card of each rarity for each nation. I'm looking through, and there's Pioneer Company, the 0-4. They're not going to bring that back until they bring back all of the 0-4s, probably. ATS, they're probably not going to bring that back until they bring back all of the HQ cards. And then there's certain cards that just almost certainly wouldn't come back, like shelling long-range stealthy groups and Sincerely Yours Committed Crew. And then there's cards which are equally not great, like Manchester. So the cards that I could see returning were first Air Landing Brigade, which is a card.
Yeah.
Mosquito fits the sort of air theme that they went with air supremacy, or they could have just brought back Commonwealth and said, hey, try to do healing again in this meta. But yeah, Royal Ulsters would not have been my first choice, but Core, I think you do bring up a very, very good point that it does have very high health for a relatively low cost unit, which seems to be something Britain is trying to do, at least with the last expansion with stuff. But I guess mean, I don't know if you guys had more thoughts on this card, but once we get to the next card in this list, it kind of gets even more.
Yeah, I mean, let's ring with the segue, because it does take us quite neatly to the Seaforth Highlanders. So Seaforth Highlanders is a 4-cost 1/7 British infantry. It has guard. It is a special, so this is a 2 of. And it has the most proactive guard text. I mean, I have actually occasionally wondered about this text and whether it could be valuable if you could buff it a bit, because Seaforth Highlanders does give you has +3 attack on the enemy turn. So in effect, this is a 4-cost 4/7 guard, which is actually not terrible body. And does seem to be, again, leaning into this mid-range and below cost big defense units feel that Britain is getting. But yeah, what do we think? Seaforth interesting, or just leaning more into kind of the same big bodies and we're not quite sure how they work yet?
So I'll let Core first on this one, I think.
I think this is going to be unplayable. Like we already have the Fusiliers, the 3-cost 0/8, which is, I would argue, a lot better. I know like it. You don't really want to play orders like except to get the for the first swap. But even then, like it becomes a 3/8. It's 1 attack lower for 1 more health for like 1 less credit. I don't know. I think Seaforth Highlanders. I understand that this card used to be like insane at one point, but I think the game has power creep to the point where that's well behind us. Like when you can compare this to like 70th Brigade, the 4-cost 1/8, that if it's on if it's not attacked, you draw a card and gain 2. Like yeah, it doesn't have guards, so it doesn't take the trades or whatever. But like the payoff for having it on board is so much higher. I don't know. I just don't see Seaforth really doing anything.
So this is fun because this is kind of the first pretty major disagreement. I think Seaforth is, when it came out, well, when it came out, it was a 1/8 and then got nerfed to a 1/7. And as a 1/7, I think it was probably one of the top 10 cards in the game. And a lot has happened since then. Namely, when most old cards come back, the question is, how good is it now that Suppress exists? And C4 getting Suppress is pretty depressing. Because then you played a 4-credit 1/7. But that's not particularly different than 70th Brigade getting Suppressed for
Yeah.
4-cost 1/8. But the payoff of if it can't get suppressed, which is not that unreasonable. Like Japan Soviet has no suppress. Japan France usually doesn't run suppress. Like there's a lot of suppress in the game, but it's concentrated into very specific decks. It's not like every deck has 1 or 2 suppress. It's like some decks have 4 and some have 0. And if your deck doesn't have suppress, C4 is just a 4-credit 4/7 guard, which is so powerful against aggro. And I think it ends up being much more relevant than, say, something like a 70th Brigade. Because the 70th Brigade, they might just hit with like a 1/3 or a 2/2, and then it's like effectively like a guard, kind of, because it's stopped like the smallest attack unit. But if they have a turn where they have a Blitzkrieg or a Type 93 or these types of cards, they just swing all face and either kill you or put you under enough pressure that they can kill you from hand, even though you still get your 1 draw and 2 health. Whereas Seaforth just actually shuts down damage into the HQ, which I think is very important for Britain specifically as a nation, because they are not particularly great on tempo anymore at this point in the game. So I think a card like Seaforth, where a lot of decks are not going to have easy answers for this, I think that this is good. I don't think this is top 10 card in the game anymore, to be clear. I just think that it is good enough to put into Britain decks. I think it is better than Blackwatch. I think it's better than 70th Brigade. I think it's probably one of the best non-elite card units in Britain. And it will help out Britain control with a curve. That being said, I don't think it's going to be enough on its own to make British control a super popular deck. But I think at the very least, you can just put Seaforth Highlanders into pretty much any British deck that's not aggro.
So, canny viewers may have noticed that I sort of passed over this relatively rapidly, because I had a funny feeling there might be 2 different opinions on this, because I sort of know the way that these guys think. I have to say, since everyone's going to want everyone's opinion, I think, and I'm going out on a limb here, because I like going out on a limb, if we see a board-focused Britain deck, if we see a board-focused Britain deck that makes use of some of these big body cards that Core I know has been playing around with, the orders that try and trade on big bodies. I think this may end up being quite a pivotal card in that deck. In particular, I will remind people that you can do some weird stuff with this card, because if you play any of the weird nonsense that is take its defense, turn it into its attack after you've buffed it, and somehow you get this to say, I don't know, 9 defense, and then you switch it to have 9 attack, that +3 attack still stacks on it as well, which makes it, even after it's done, bouncing around and hitting everything on the opposing side and probably killing it all if you happen to play one of the big fight cards on it. Everyone's least favorite trade. I think the value of this is going to be on a deck, though, that doesn't currently exist. I think it's going to massively depend on whether the new expansion gives Britain some tools for an infantry tank, basically. Again, not aircraft, board-focused deck, but I tend to lean more in JKing's direction with, I think, if that deck exists, you're slamming 2 of these in it, because just on rate, 4 cost, 1 op cost, 4/7, guard or not, is really good.
I think if you're looking at playing this card in control, I think the very obvious question that comes up is it better than Cromwell? And I think the answer might be no, in just a general control deck, just because of how powerful Cromwell is with bounty. However,
Yeah.
I think the answer is you run both, because British control has not been in a good spot, and if you had a chance to put in 4 good guard units to play on turn 4, you absolutely would take it, because at the moment you're kind of doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, if someone said to me, hey, do you want to try Brit Control, but we'll let you run 4 copies of Cromwell, guess what? I would be doing that all every single day of the week, even if you had to remove some of the text from it. I do think, yeah, that is the other side of it, is the control side of it. And Brit Control has always had the moment for me of being on the edge of being quite good if it could just find its system. So I think time will tell, but I would keep an eye on this card, and I certainly think it's a more worthy return than its friend, but, you know. And the last return, of course, is a standard card, and we have a Spitfire sighted, coming back into the game. This is the Spitfire Mark V. I'd love this to be an interesting read, but so Spitfire Mark V is a standard card. It's a 6 cost, 2 op cost, 6/6 fighter. I mean, it's a good body, but I'll be clear. Most people probably aren't often used to a card being read out with stats like that nowadays. There's usually something or other, even if it is, as we classically say, 1939 just slapped Blitz on it. I mean, this is very vanilla, but I will say the stats do not suck for a standard card. The op cost isn't the most appealing thing in the world, but I'm curious as to what the differing opinions are. JKing, what do you make of the return of the Mark V?
This one kind of baffles me. Like, on the one hand, I get it. You can play it very, very early on, and it's just a big card. Spitfire is a very iconic plane for like World War II enthusiasts. It's a very solid pickup in draft. It's just fighters are king, and it is a very big fighter. What baffles me, though, is there are 5 cards in the game that synergize with Spitfire. Like, Spitfire is one of the few actual tribes in the game where if you hover over it, it says fighter, and then in smaller text underneath the Spitfire. There's 5 cards that have synergy with the Spitfire tribal. All 5 are in rotation, and none of them are coming back. So,
Yeah.
and also the 5 cost 5/5 Spitfire vanilla is in the game. So I just genuinely can't grasp why this is coming back, especially because of the position Britain is in, where not like Britain's the top dog and needs some resting time. Like there was a lot of standard British cards that are currently rotated that they could have brought back without breaking the game or anything.
Yeah.
But just having interesting cards like Timely Supplies or Baluch Regiment actually would have been a really interesting one to come back. But or like East Surrey Regiment, the 3-cost 2/6 guard could be very interesting with the new fight stuff that Britain has going on. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
well-
instead we got a thick.
Yeah,
So
I will say I was very surprised that we didn't get another kind of big defense unit as a standard back. But yeah, Core, you seem to be kind of in the same direction with this. Is like, is it a good card in the sense of stats? Yes, but does it really make any sense?
Well, I'm just going to go out on a limb again. I know you guys are internal testing, so you can't say it. I'm just assuming this is going to be one of the reworks because there's no world in which they bring this back as a 6/6 vanilla. Like, not a hope. I mean, it's in draft. It's in the draft format currently because it's one of the reserve pool cards that they've like legalized for Britain, and it's very good in draft. But yeah, no, this doesn't make sense to me unless it's for a rework. That's the only realm I see this working.
That's a good point. I forgot that this already was in draft, so they didn't even have to bring it back in draft because draft now uses a different pool.
Yeah, draft's whole new pool means that it makes even less sense as a sense of just a body to bring back, because you can already play this in the only format in which, frankly, it's currently valid.
Yeah, no, I can see this getting like the F4 Wildcat treatment where they just completely change the card and it comes back as something completely new.
Now, make a note, folks. Cause out on a limb with a prediction. There's probably going to be a few of those.
If they don't, I will be incredibly confused as to why they've done this. They make zero sense. Like otherwise, genuinely.
I'm so glad that sentence didn't end in a different way, because I've known people get caught out with making ridiculous statements like, if this isn't reworked, I will do X, Y, and Z, and then suddenly it comes. It's just, you know, I had a worry for a moment. But yeah, so that covers everything that is returning for Britain. So now let's have a chat about what's going away. So, I mean, there's a whole lot to go here, so we might do a few of these fairly quickly, but we will kind of stop where we think there's a connection, and there will be a few things where I think you might find us cross-referencing occasionally, because there are some linked cards disappearing, and this is true in all of the nations. So the first card leaving us, and I'm going to say it openly, I am deeply glad to see the back of this card, and I will explain for why before I pass it on to other people. Baker Street Irregulars, the 1-cost special British order that says develop a British Special Force unit. If you control a commando, also develop a British order, is going away. There is one, and I mean, there are other reasons, but the main reason that I am glad to see this go away is the ridicularity that this thing can generate another copy of itself. This card has been way more instrumental, in my opinion, in some very frustrating decks than people have been prepared to call out. This card irritated me when I first found it could generate itself, and I have a history with Develop, but I'm leaving that until we get to another nation. Spoilers. But I am not glad to see this card go away. We'll go in order. We'll let Core go last here because he's newest to the game. But JKing, how do you feel about the removal of the Baker Street boys?
So in general, I'm pretty happy about this. So Baker Street Irregulars, I very early hopped onto the train of running Baker Street Irregulars and a handful of commandos in control as just an extra value package. And it was very fun in that deck. But that being said, it was also problematic. And obviously it was played in the commando deck for obvious reasons. And it was very frustrating in that one in particular, because sometimes your opponent would play a second wave after wave that you couldn't reasonably play around. Or they'd play a 4th commando raid to kill you with like the dregs of their deck. And it was just like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. In control, I found it was in like control versus control. I found Baker Street Irregulars had less of a overwhelming impact based on like the swings of what you could get on it. But at the same time, it's just it's the most random develop out of one of the playable developed cards. And I am not a huge fan of randomness in general. Because like Retribution, there's 12 Retributions. The Blitz Doctrine, Contest Doctrine, I don't know the exact rule size, but you see the ones that people pick fairly regularly. Baker Street Irregulars, the pool of British orders is massive. And there's a lot that are going to be used in hyper-specific situations. Like they give a guide unit Fury +3 attack and salvage. Could like just win you the game out of nowhere. So yeah, in general, I'm happy to see it's gone. It's also a card from Covert Operations, which just reached the ability to be rotated point, I believe. And there's a number of developed cards being rotated, so it seems that obviously there's some that they just released and some of the newer expansions as well. So it's not the entire mechanic is going out the window. But we're seeing some of the more problematic developed cards leave. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, Core, what are your thoughts?
I'm glad this card is going. This card can burn in hell, I swear. Yeah, on one hand it's upsetting, right? Because this is like one of the few value generators that like Brit Control had access to in nation. So in that sense, it's sad to see it go. But on the other hand, this is still stuck with me like since the start of Naval Warfare. When I was making the Heinz video, I lost a game versus Commandos. And off their 2 copies of Baker Street Irregulars, both copies generated an extra copy of Wave After Wave. I played through 2 Wave After Waves, the natural one and the first one generated, and the third one was backbreaking. The fact that I had to play around triple Wave After Wave is like so frustrating. And I will say, I mentioned this recently in one, I can't remember in which Discord. I think going forward, elites should not be in the develop pool at all. I think elites should just be removed from the develop pool. You should not have to play around elites being randomly generated. Whatever about anything else, but elites should. It would have fixed so many problems with like Blitz Doctrine as well, like not having to play against Maus coming out of your Brit main handlock deck. So yeah, I think that's a change that is worth looking into. Just removing elites from develop pools in general across the board. But as far as BSI goes, I'm glad this card is going. It's such a feels bad to lose to just random like a random commando, like the 3/3 commando, and a random wave after wave. Just sucks.
I have to say, I will say, I don't quite know where you borrow your luck from, but I mean, in the time I've been playing the game, I've played through a couple of double wave after waves. I have not experienced the triple wave after wave. That's a new level of frustrating, but yeah, it does illustrate the point.
I'll also add, we've talked mostly about the order developing part of it, and that is the most random. And in some ways, it was the most fun develop card to pick because a lot of times you just get like 3 really very, very different orders, none of which you would ever play in your deck, but then you have to evaluate which of the 3 is the best. And in those situations, it's fun. But the unit side of the develop was almost worse in some ways because there was basically you just want the number 9 commando, unless you're playing a commando deck and then the number 10 commando. But 9 times out of 10, you just want the number 9 commando, and the odds of getting it like a 1 in 3 or something, maybe like 40%. I don't know what the actual like math on that is. But it just sucks that it's just like, oh, you pick like an absolute garbage unit, you'll just throw on the board to die to retire like 4 turns from now. That doesn't impact at all. But like 30% of the time, you get a number 9 commando, and it allows you to kill bows.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy. Yeah, so, I mean, again, we are kind of mostly in agreement. Shifting along to another card, which, I mean, this is going to be relatively quick because I don't think we need to hover around Commando Raid for hugely long because a lot has been talked about in the storied history of this card, which in its present state, I'm not going through the whole history of this card, I don't have that much spare time, is a 6-cost order. It's a limited, and it is deal 1 damage, add 2 number 10 commando units to your support line. this was a pivotal card in the Commando's ping deck in its multiple iterations and its two particularly annoying iterations. The Reichsbank moment, which was truly ludicrous, and the ramp moment, which was marginally less ludicrous. Then it was very politely escorted out the back of the building in a balance patch and basically shot dead. I can't say, even as a Brit lover and someone who did play around with Commandos, because initially I actually enjoyed Commandos, and that's the thing. I think it was an interesting mechanic that there were some really good thinky decks that you could build around. I had a lot of fun with some Britain Japan Commandos and stuff. But as soon as you had any form of effectively accelerant, whether that was Reichsbank or ramp, you just found the optimum way to use this, which was to have 1 billion credits and play 1 billion orders, and it ended up being tremendously feels bad. So weirdly, on the one hand, I get why it's going. I understand that Commandos had an issue. There is still, and I may be alone in this, a part of me that is sad to see what could have been an interesting, thinky kind of ping engine deck dead and buried for the sake of not being able to exist in the rest of the game. But hey, Core, how do you feel about the disappearance of Commando Raid?
I mean, it's fine. In their current state, they're like unplayable anyway after the change to mainly Brit orders, because the amount of damage you can potentially output off the cycle orders is like massively reduced. So I don't think this is going to affect anything moving forward, and it's a pretty healthy change for the game as a whole to kind of sunset Commandos, at least in their like wider archetypal sense. Like we saw like last expansion as well, they removed a bunch of the Commando stuff like resourcefulness or whatever it was, and a few other pieces. So it's just, I think it's just like the sunsetting of a mechanic that's been around for a little bit. I know this only came out in like covert ops, but Commando decks have been around for a little bit longer than that. So yeah, I think this is just a healthy move overall, just to slowly usher these cards out.
Yeah, now I happen to know that JKing's got a bit of a history with Commandos in general, so I'm interested to hear what your opinions are on this one as well.
So the rotation of Commando Raid on its own, opinions on, nobody was playing this card in the meta. I don't think anyone was going to start playing this card in the meta. And yeah, this card, it could go away and never come back. And I'm not going to get into my whole spiel about Commando Raid, but my issue is with the absolute massacre of Commandos as an archetype due to the sins of Commando Raid and Baker Street Irregulars. And these are two cards that you then rotated as soon as possible. So, like, honestly, I don't think they're ever going to do this, but I would love to see this patch come out with reverting the change to the actual number 10 Commando unit, because the Commandos as a frustrating, broken, crapped, crazy deck was entirely based on Baker Street and Commando Raid, both of which are gone now, and I highly doubt either of them will ever come back. However, in the meantime, Commandos are completely and utterly unplayable. And Commandos were always kind of unplayable before Commando Raid got buffed. However, they were still good enough to like be a low tier 2 deck if you could build it properly in any given meta. And now they're just so bad, and the Allied Nation barely matters because it doesn't count for Commando pings. I don't know. It frustrates me a lot that they chose to nerf the Commando unit if they were going to rotate both of these guys anyways, like 6 months later. And they could have even just rotated Commando and Baker Street 6 months earlier than they would otherwise have allowed, because we've seen other games rotate problem cards early if it's limited design space. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I think you and I kind of agree to it, because like when the changes were announced, I was like, yes, this is the, like, if you are going to change the core Commando unit for the reasons that you are, I get it, this is the change that I would advocate for, but I do tend to agree with you. I'm then very confused that afterwards we're now just rotating everything, because surely you could have just, as you say, done that a bit earlier and maybe left room for those of us who were playing with like non-British order driven commando decks and interesting stuff that you could do. But I think before the two older dinosaurs in this continue going on about our bemoaning commandos and loses a bunch of viewers, we will move on. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I will also say that I just got a ping from my OBS, which I'm currently disagreeing with about something about audio quality. If there are any issues, I'll try and fix them. My monitoring is showing everyone as fine, so no one needs to worry. But if for some reason you had a weird audio issue in there, if you're viewing it back, I will have done my best to fix it. Right, so next up we have delaying tactics. Now, all right, let's get... I'll do the quick read through and then I'll get the headline out the way. So this is a 2-cost standard British order, and it just says all units in the front line must retreat. This order has historically been tried in a number of different things, generally speaking in decks that were trying to do some weird and wacky, and I'm going to say it, mostly fun stuff. There was a time at which both myself and Baron von Glower, who were playing around quite heavily with building around the new Kangaroo transport, and we were playing some fairly crazy kind of guard buff decks that were then using this to clear some space and do some fairly crazy stuff with Entrenched. But then buffs happened, and we got the ability to... in effect, so if no one has come across it, I imagine you have, but let's just cover it in case you haven't. Buffs is the British unit that has, when it's targeted by an order or a target card effect, it gets +1/+1, which, yes, of course, means if you target with a buff, it buffs itself, then gets the buff from the buff. And if you used it with... now let me see if I get the order right correctly here. You have buffs, you play for freedom to reduce its operation cost to 0, which gives it +1/+1 because it's buffs. Then you play Bocage Warfare, which gives it no bonus except +1/+1 while it's in the support line, but it does get, and this will be important in a moment, a bonus when it moves into the front line of +2/+2, which we'll get back to. Then you play delaying tactics to clear the front line. Then you play Kangaroo Transport, which gives it a small buff, heavy armor, and it buffs itself. Then you push it into the front line, which gives it the Bocage Warfare buff. Then you smack HQ... No. First of all, you then play Tactical Withdrawal, which moves it back to the support line. You push it into the front line again, at which point it triggers the Bocage Warfare buff again, which triggers its self-buff again. And I lost track at some point while I was testing of quite how much damage I could burn through, but I at one point comfortably burned through nearly 50 points of guard plus HQ with just that combo, and it's ridiculous. And clearly this was an enabling card, so there are going to be a lot of people who will see this card going away, and that's probably at the moment the first thing that's going to come into their heads, because it's about the only time we've seen it see play. I will say, though, as a believer in the idea of a British deck that's a little bit slower and wants bodies on the board, this was always an interesting tool to have access to, until it got combined with a bunch of frankly broken shit. But anyway, Core's chuckling, so Core, where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, this is just a healthy rotation. Like, it was either... I was fairly sure it was either this or Tactical Withdrawal that was going to get pulled, because they're both only ever used to enable something degenerate. But I think delaying tactics is like the bigger offender of just removing any counterplay to buffs, because if your opponent has delaying tactics, then whatever you did in the front line doesn't matter. They just delaying tactics bounce everything into your hand, and then they can get in with their withdrawals and their shenanigans. So yeah, it was going to be one or the other. I think delaying tactics makes the most sense because it has... This also affects like the Humber side of things as well if they don't go for the buff skill. But yeah, this is just, I think, a good, healthy rotation.
JKing?
Yeah, I think delaying tactics was. I don't believe it has ever seen any changes since it got released in Theaters of War, and that was in what summer 2020, and it's been in the game and it's seen very limited play until now. But it's just one of those cards that is very clearly designed with a very small card pool and was always going to become problematic at some point, especially at a standard rarity. It's cards has historically struggled to find the balance in designing delay cards that aren't just full to play against and support whatever the best OTK is. Like delaying tactics isn't as bad as Scorched Earth or Snowstorm or even Monty, even though that's good enough to play in everything basically. But delaying tactics as a standard, it's just not a fun card to play against if it's being used effectively, and it's also a card that is absolutely unplayable in certain matchups, which makes it difficult to run outside of very specific combo decks. So yeah, I'm happy that this is gone, and it doesn't quite kill buffs, but I hope that it lowers the win rate of buffs enough and makes buffs harder to play enough that people stop playing it on ladder.
Yeah, I mean, I will. I've been on this soapbox in many places already. I try not to fall into the buffs trap because, yes, you can get progress on buffs. I've seen some new players being advised by other people that the best deck to build as a new player is buffs. It really isn't, kids. It doesn't teach you the fundamentals of the game, and actually its win rate isn't that good. What it does allow you to do is, if you don't mind sitting and repping the same thing endlessly, you will slowly make progress just through high roll. But we're not going to see that after delaying tactics goes. I would like to see the effect brought back, but I think I'd like to see the effect brought back, as JKing points out, on a card that's not a standard. I think the big issue with this is it does help dial up OTK consistency because of the likelihood of seeing it. And that, I agree. I think as your card pool expands as a designer, stuff like this just becomes more dangerous. I hope to see a rework of this in the future, but for the meantime, I think we can all let this float quietly into the reserve pool and just chill out for a while, even though I am a big fan of the artwork. Next up...
Well, we're entering a world where all the boss players are going to start slotting in Blackburns.
Yeah, let's not help design buffs, shall we? Let's leave it quietly in a corner. So we'll take a look at it again. Actually, this is another kind of a tool that I personally have actually used quite a lot, and I know a number of players probably hate me for it, but that's a different thing. This is Enemy Contact. This is the 2-cost British special order, which says pin target unit, draw a card. I have made some occasionally quite egregious use of this in British ally or British main control decks that have some particular ways of functioning the board. I think, why it's rotating, assuming that we're trying to temper this sort of thing, but I don't know. It just, to me, it feels like, was it really that offensive? But JKing, you've been kicking around longer even than me. How do you feel about this as a reserve?
This one is a little surprising to me. I mean, Enemy Contact, when it was first announced, there was there's a very fun story related to that I'm not going to tell here. But basically, it's a very simple, straightforward card that is just good enough to play in decks for a variety of reasons. I mean, 2 credits draw a card is not something you're happy about. 2 credits pin a target unit, something you're not happy about. 2 credits pin a target unit and draw a card, that's something you're starting to get into being workable. So this saw play in pretty much everything. It's great with the Cromwell to combine the pin and the suppress. It was great in pin decks, obviously. It was great in combo decks because it cycles and slows down the opponent killing you as you through your deck. And it was all the way just good. However, the most toxic ways to use this card have been rotated out. Like Forced Surrender is gone. That's like the big one that comes to mind. Push OTK has been killed. So I don't see this card as being problematic, and Britain's not particularly in a good spot as a nation. Outside of buffs, which, I mean, some run enemy contact, some don't, but the delaying tactics is enough to kill buffs. So I feel like this is just kind of like a, I don't know if there's like a quota of how many like playable cards each nation has to lose to a rotation. But it just kind of feels like it was taken out because, like, I don't think Britain's gonna miss it that much. Like, I think Britain is worse for losing this card, but I don't think it's like a core component to any deck at the moment.
That's fair. Core?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I build Britain, it's a consideration, but usually it's like, it's kind of like that 40th, 41st card. You're like, this will do for now, but it's likely going to get cut at the end of the deck build when I've got like something more refined. I mean, it's been fine in control. I played it in Japan-Britain control at the start of like Naval Warfare when we had with Mikura, just as like a crazy pin suppress anti-aggro list. And it was fine. The fact that it cycles is like pretty good. It saw quite a lot of play at the start of Naval Warfare in Commandos because they needed like the game to slow down a little bit to get online. But I don't think it's really been seen since Commandos kind of dropped off the face of the earth. So I don't think this is going to hurt Britain. It's upsetting to lose it as a tool, but again, I don't think this is going to move the needle either way on whether or not Brit control is viable. It's a nice piece of interaction that's gone. But I don't know. It wasn't really seeing play to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think we're not gonna loiter and talk about it too much because trust me, there's plenty more cards to go. Right. Speaking of next cards to go, here's another elite. So this time it is an elite which is leaving us. This is HMS Talbot, which hasn't actually been around that long, but HMS Talbot is a 1-cost British countermeasure. It's, as I say, elite. And it says, if your HQ is about to receive lethal damage, give it +6 defense first. I'm going to say it because I said it when it was released, and I still maintain it to be true. This is a complete nothing burger of a card. I don't think I've ever run it. I don't think I've ever advocated anybody else running it. I don't think I've ever seen anyone run it in anything but the most irritating decks that just stubbornly want to try and avoid dying until they get their OTK. It's a rotation. I don't know. Anybody got any big thoughts on Talbot?
I wouldn't be surprised if this was rotated just to avoid confusion that this is a Navy card.
Yeah. This is the basically the only thought I have about HMS Talbot is literally yesterday I opened a gold copy of HMS Talbot from a pack, and I'm a little sad.
Oh no!
It's yeah. I mean, Talbot. I see why some people were like deceived into thinking it might be good when it was announced. Because if you look at other games, like a card like Ice Block, Hearthstone, which is the equivalent of countermeasures in Hearthstone, and it's when you would die, don't die, and you become immune for the rest of the turn. But there's a few very key differences. One, it stops you from dying that turn, period, whereas HMS Talbot does not. It just simply heals you 6, and oftentimes your opponent has more than 6 over lethal, in which case Talbot is useless. And the second one is Ice Block. You play it, and once you pay the credits for it once, and then it is up for the rest of the game. It doesn't take up a spot in your hand, and you don't have to spend additional credits holding it up anytime you think your opponent might be able to kill you, which is another very big issue with Talbot. So yeah, it is like the very, very, very poor man's Ice Block that is bad. I don't think I've ever seen it played a single time. I know I've heard stories of other people played against it. I don't think I've personally ever seen this card.
Well, so I can confirm with a confession. Don't judge. I was recently, for the sake of giving advice to people, testing buffs. Because I wanted to see whether the win rate was somehow better if I got reps in than I had got it when I first tested it. And I will say, It's the only time I've recently saw this played. I got into a buffs mirror match, and my winning turn on buffs, my first swing with buffs triggered my opponent's HMS Talbot, and I was like, oh, sad face. So I can confirm it, if you are that opponent, by the way. I am sort of sorry, not sorry, because that probably felt terrible, but it does illustrate the point. Gore, you had something else to add.
Yeah, it's just like in a world where we have like National Fire Service, just Talbot just does nothing. Like Fire Service, it blanks way more damage when you look at it compared to this. So it's just a completely waste of an elite slot. So I'm glad this is gone.
Yeah. Well, that one was easy. So this is Infiltrate. This is a British limited order. This is the 5-cost intel order. So it's Intel 2. Each friendly commando deals damage to a random enemy equal to known enemy cards. So hypothetically, and I have seen people cook with this so many times it hurts my head, because it's never actually turned out to be, in my opinion, consistent or effective, but people kept trying it. Hypothetically, this was the king card of mostly Britain, Japan, Intel OTK. But I can't. I don't. I'm passing it on. Has anyone got something to say? I feel bad. I don't. It's just not notable to me.
I remember testing Infiltrate, like when it came out, and it felt very powerful into certain decks, and it just felt like a very win wartime. Like if you're in a position where your opponent has a big hand size, but they're struggling to remove your commandos, and you draw an Infiltrate, you're able to hit your opponent for crazy damage numbers in a single turn. And it saw some play with Reichsbank because you were able to get up to those high enough credit turns to like play a bunch of commandos and then infiltrate in the same turn. But it was usually as like a one-up, I think, as like the equivalent of a Bismarck, where it's just like one of big burn cards sometimes. But yeah, I think it could have been left in the game without causing any issues, but I also see why they're rotating it, since they're rotating so much of the commando package that it kind of would have been stranded if they'd left it. Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts about it.
Or anything to add?
I mean, it's an interesting card that's leaving. That's about kind of it. My only experience of playing this card is picking it off Baker Street Irregulars versus exactly Germany as a means of just blowing them out in like when Commandos was playable. So yeah, it was an interesting win condition for like Commandos, but just wasn't really good enough, too expensive. And yeah, it's just an interesting card that's leaving. I don't know.
You never know. We
I will
might
say,
see.
I'm only now just appreciating how beautiful this card art is.
Yeah, when it first released, I do remember this. This was one of the first videos where I got my reputation as the art critic when I'm reviewing cards. It is a stunning piece of art, but yeah, we'll see. Might come back. Right. Lure. This is a 2-cost British countermeasure. It's a standard card, and it says, when the enemy gives the second order this turn, counter it. I'm done. This card never saw play. I got nothing, guys.
I have probably more to say about lure than like the last 4 cards we've looked at, which I'm sure is probably surprising to a lot of people. I love this card so much. I don't think it is great. It didn't see any play, but I think that is largely as a result of Britain as a whole, Britain control as a whole, not really seeing any play. Anytime I made a Britain control deck, even Britain ally, I almost always tried to fit in at least a single copy of lore, because nobody plays around this card. I mean, most people don't play around any countermeasures, to be honest, but like, you know, at the higher ranks, you'll see people play around Ultra, they'll play around Doubting System. Nobody, not a single soul have I ever seen play around lore. And it's so satisfying to trigger. It also catches really specific stuff. Like later into the game, if your opponent draws a Blitz Doctrine and does Blitz Doctrine, Contest Doctrine, it catches Contest Doctrine, so they don't get the permanent massive buff or the big tank. If they're doing research, like if they do like add tier 3 German or like they have tier 3 German research and they play it to add the U-boat discard destroy card to their hand and then play that, lore catches that. Same with any of the other researches. So I think it is a much better card than people gave it credit for. And it also caused you to have to think about countermeasures in a very different way than before, because pretty much every other um, counter card that Britain had for orders was just play the worst order in your hand first, and more with the opposite to that. On the other hand, I can see why that's very, very bad to have in your game, because if you reach a situation where Britain control is good again, and there's people who run one copy of Lore and one copy of Bounding System and one copy of Ultra, it just becomes miserable. I'm very glad that like offloring was not a British card. For example, there's no ways of randomly getting Lore, which kind of held back its potential to be really, really frustrating. So I'm sad it's gone. But at the same time, I'm also happy that it was never very popular.
I have to say, I have to call out for those who don't know him perhaps as well as I do, that is the most galaxy brain JKing commentary that I've heard in a while. This shows why some people think on a different level. I never thought about it that way. I just didn't bother, but it's a fair point. Cord, did you reach JKing's level of epiphany with this card, or are you down here with me?
No, I tested this card, and I also was doing some very goofy things with it. But I tested this after Naval Warfare in a deck in like Brick Control with like 3 to 4 HMS Scepter. Because what happens is when your opponent realizes you're playing Scepter, they start playing around the other copies of Scepter, which means Lure becomes very, very good.
Huh.
So yeah, you can force them, like with Scepter, they play an order, it gives them back the plan, they're like, oh, well, I'm playing around Scepter for the rest of the game, and then they play, if you have Scepter plus Lure, you Scepter their thing, and then you, like, lure the plan, so they're burning a ton of credits trying to just play their hand. Yeah, with Scepter, it was very funny, but not particularly good.
I have very fond memories of playing this card a lot in Blood and Iron, when one of the most popular decks on ladder was the Soviet Italy control, with front formation just being like an absolute dominant force in control matchups. And I remember just consistently playing Britain and then floating 3 credits while holding up Lore, and my opponent would play sickle front formation fairly regularly, and it was the greatest feeling in the world. But then it also led to a lot of situations where I'd hold up 3 credits on like their turn 10 and then just rip the front formation. It was like, come on. Yeah, I don't know if it ever made it into any of my videos, but this Lore was also a bit of an inside joke between me and some of the people I talked to in the cards community, where I was like trying to sell people on Lore. I was playing decks with like 3 copies of Lore, and everyone was calling me insane. And then whenever I was in a voice call, like streaming a game with somebody, and my opponent triggered a Lure, I would just shout Lure as loud as possible.
Oh,
But
God.
yeah, I had fun times with a card that never really saw it play and never really had any impact.
I gotta say, and this, folks, is why I always try and get people along. I missed the boat on this Lure. Accept my apologies. Apparently, the larger brains, when it comes to control, had a different view, but. Yeah, I bet we'll shift along because we've got a few to cover. This is a card that I do have history with, which will surprise nobody. This is Sea Embargo. So Sea Embargo is currently, we won't go through the history of this, a 2-cost standard British order. And it says, give target unit +1/+1. If it is an air unit, develop a British air unit with 2 or less attack. This card has been nerfed. In its current version, it's kind of okay, but there are better things to play most of the time in air, and yes, this is coming from the air guy, but I have, over the years, played a lot of this card, and I personally am kind of sad to see it go, because it was one of the best value generation toys that Britain Air had to play with. There is a lot that you can do with the British air unit with 2 or less pool. Trust me, there are moments at which your opponent will get very, very annoyed at the fact that you are able to play Sea Embargo, because if you know the pool and the playstyle well enough, it can be crippling, because there are some really good picks, and you're quite likely to see them. I'm not 100% sure that I get why it's rotating, other than I know that there has to be a quota of rotation. This feels to me like a card which isn't seeing a lot of play. Air's gone in a different direction. We can probably rotate it out and maybe bring it back, maybe rework it or something a little bit later. But yeah, I am unashamedly sad to say goodbye to my friend, because we have proper history, me and this card. What about you guys? All right, now I just feel seen for being the air guy. It's like, just leave me hanging there.
Yeah, I think they're rotating it for a couple of reasons. One, I think there's just going to be a higher number of covert operation cards rotated in this rotation than in any other rotation, just because it's the new kid on the block in terms of being allowed to be rotated from. Also, it's a develop card, and it seems to me that they're trying to just shrink the size of the develop pool in the game, which is probably a fine thing. But as you said, Embargo, pre-nerf, it was incredible in Britain there. Post-nerf, it was fine in Britain there. I know there's a lot of debate about whether you should run it at all in Britain there post-nerf. I think it depended on the ally, and I don't think you were running 4 copies of it anymore either way. But in all, I was never a big fan of this card. Not in terms of like not thinking it was good, but in terms of just being very frustrated by this card. Because like sometimes your opponent would just like play down 4 sharks in a turn on like turn 8 and kill you from hand, or they'd play like 4 kitty hawks over the course of the game, all of which go face for 8 damage. And then like I play Sea Embargo, and it offers me like I just need a single unit to play with like 2 credits, and it offers me Skua, Barracuda, and like Kitty Hawk, or like I guess now it can offer you Sunderland. Yeah, I don't know. I just hate develop.
I have no idea of what you speak with regards to degenerate win conditions with Shark. I've never done that to anyone on ladder and been really not sorry for it. Core, what about you? I don't know that I've ever seen you be a massive air player, but have you played around with Sea Embargo at all?
Yeah, I have played like a reasonable amount of air, just I've never done it on camera. But yeah, Sea Embargo was a card I was playing 2 of, I think in the last list I was playing of air, primarily just because it can develop more copies of Kitty Hawk, which is pretty much everything you want to be doing anyway, which is board control, burn damage. I mean, but that's like pretty much the extent of why I was running the card. The buff is meager. It's just like a nice little bit of value generation for a little bit of extra reach and some extra bodies. So it was fine. I think 2 was like the most you would want to run anyway. But yeah, I mean, I agree with JKing. I think they're cutting down on the amount of develop in the game, which we'll see going forward as well. There's a number of develop cards leaving with this rotation, so I think it's just a health of the game kind of thing that they're doing here with the develop stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree. People will be expecting when we get to some other nations to hear me rant, and they probably will, because I've had some thoughts on develop over the years. Right, next we have Stiff Upper Lip. So this is kind of a very venerable card in that you do tend to see it every now and then, but in very specific decks. So this is a British standard order, 2 cost, and it's just 2 cost, draw a card, draw another if you control a guard. Kind of does what it says on the tin, really. But I think I'm pro this. I think it's a sensible rotation, especially given the look that we might be getting towards leaning more kind of big British bodies and guards. I don't know that they need a high value kind of standard draw engine when Britain's kind of already ripe for it. I think this card was kind of ripe to just sit out for a while. I don't think it's particularly offensive. It's occasionally used in the odd degenerate delaying guard OTK deck, but then what British guard related card isn't? But I think in the grand scheme of things, this is just, I think, another one of those quiet sit it out for a while and you'll probably come back later cards. But I am kind of sad to see it go, if only because it's another piece of art that I never objected to seeing. But JKing, what about you? You got much history with this?
Yeah, Stiff Upper Lip is a very interesting card. Excuse me. Where when it got released, it didn't see a ton of play when it got released, but I was very happy when it got released because at the time Britain had a lot of card draw. Lend-Lease was in the game, 7 credits, draw 4 cards. And the issue with Britain having card draw is the best deck in the game was Britain Air, which ran 4 convoys and 3 Lend-Lease. So it was very difficult to give Britain card draw without just fueling air harder. And Stiff Upper Lip managed to do that, but it was never running air because they had to not run guide units. So that was pretty fun. And then I really started to pick up steam with the credit denial deck, and people were running it with the Welsh Guards, a little 1 credit guard. And that was just a very fun package that I saw people sort of come up with. And that was just very interesting. And then they rotated Welsh Guards for a while and they just brought it back and people started playing that package again in buffs. Now they're rotating the other side of the package. So I'm a little sad to see it go, especially with Seaforth. That we're probably going to be playing this in Britain Control as the draw engine. But Britain still has Convoy, it still has MI5. There's no shortage of draw in Britain. You're just going to have to run something different draw in Britain. And yeah, that's fine. I hope it comes back one day because it's a fun card, but it is what it is.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sad to see this go. Like JKing said, it is seeing play currently with the Welsh Guard package in buffs, but I have actually been playing quite a lot of this card in Japan-Britain control because Japan and Britain have very good guards between them. So having access to 2 credits, draw 2 in like Japan main control was very, very nice without having to rely on things like expansion. So yeah, that's the second thing they've taken away from that deck. They took home defense away from me last time, so they're slowly taking the deck away from me, which is very, very annoying. But but this isn't going to have as like that big of a meta impact. We have Convoy, which is like unconditional draw 2, which is fine still. But yeah, this does affect like the slightly faster combo decks.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Right, clicking along, see how we can do with the pace. I am keeping an eye on time. So now we've got a British Limited card. This is 15th Recce. So this is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 3/3 infantry, and it has deployment. Target a unit. 15th Recce gets +1/+1 and guard when the targeted unit deals damage. I will say, there have been some fairly obscene things that you can do with this if you can get them to work. None of them, in my experience, have ever been massively consistent, but they've certainly been interesting. I'm not colossally surprised to see it go. I'm also not massively, expecting to see it go. I think it's still one of those cards that has the potential to just, depending on what else is available, do some fairly stupid things, particularly if you have ways of causing a unit to repeatedly deal damage in some weird way.
We have it.
Yeah, I'm familiar, and this is I think one of the reasons that this is finding its quiet way into the background. Is I honestly think the main reason is just to avoid anyone deciding to do anything truly degenerate with this. But yeah, Core, I'm guessing you're thinking much the same way as me.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't done anything, but we do have frontal defense in the game, and it does do very goofy things with Recce, so it's not, I can see, I think this is more of like chat removal more than anything else, but it does have some very, very funny interactions with things like frontal defense, just like slapping frontal defense on say if you're on oh god, I can't think of the name of it. Words escape me, but slapping frontal defense on anything, targeting with a Recce, and then end of turn, especially against aggro, this thing gets +8/+8 in guard. So
yeah,
yeah, that's the Recce. It came out. I never played it, never saw it, and then United Front came out, and I think one of the very first decks I did with United Front was a frontal defense Recce deck, and I got the combo off once, and it got +2/+2, and then got suppressed. And I'm like, okay, and deleted the deck, and I've never played with it again, and never seen it again.
yeah.
I opened up my collection because I was curious. I'm like, well, what are you? I was like, well, maybe there's just no other options or better options for like limiteds to rotate from Britain for operations. And that's how I learned that they've actually rotated every single limited from covert operation that Britain had in the set. They've actually rotated over half of Britain's covert operation kind.
Yeah, funnily enough, in my research earlier on today, I came across that same little nugget. Right, so continuing along the lines, we've got the 5th Parachute Brigade. So this is a 1 cost, 0 op cost, 1/1 standard infantry with mobilize. I'm gonna kind of try and make this one relatively quick unless anyone has anything to add. This has been talked about before. There was a dev article previously in which they have openly said that they are intending to effectively, as soon as they're able to, get mobilize out of the game to maybe redevelop it and bring it back at a different time, which I personally think is fine because mobilize never really massively took off in the time that I was playing, and I have a feeling if it ever really, really took off, it was just going to be hell on earth. And in a land with suppress, is this thing really doing anything? But yeah, I think this is something that we've seen telegraphed before. But yeah, if anyone's got any quick thoughts, please shoot them away.
So I actually have like I have a bit to say about this card, but I first want to correct myself about my statement I said previously. 7th Scottish Borderers is a British limited from covert operations that was not rotated, so you guys can start backspacing your comments that you were leaving on the video.
That's so not happening.
Brigade, the 5th Parachute Brigade this is going to be before your time, but both of your times in playing kind. 5th Parachute Brigade on release was 0 cost, 1 operation. And it was incredible in 2 decks. One was the Mobilize deck, which actually was decent. It was sort of mid to high tier 2 at various points. It saw play in the Final 4 of the 2021 World Championship. Saw play and might have even won a couple of different like OCCs over the years. And part of that was just 5th Parachute being 0 cost. So you'd play with the Potez, which was when you play a Mobilize unit, gain 2 health and draw a card. And it basically just let you chain through a bunch of them at once. And the other deck that played it was Hummer on release because it was still 0 cost at that point. So you'd play like turn 1, 3 5th Parachute Brigade, then a Hummer, and then on turn 2 you'd play like Combined Armed on the Hummer, and you're like 3 2/2s in the backline just grow. And that is what caused them to make it 1 cost 0 off, because turns out playing 2 or 3 or 4 5th Parachutes on turn 1 was really stupid. And then no one's played it since then. So yeah, those are my thoughts on 5th Parachute.
Or anything to add?
Nope, I got nothing.
Sweet. See, we can do quick occasionally. Right, the Blenheim Mark 1. So this is another British limited card. This is the 4 cost, 2 op cost, a 3/3 bomber that deals double damage if the front line is empty. Right, everyone knows I am the unapologetic British air player, and I actually had to go reread this card multiple times because I've never done anything with it, which kind of speaks volumes. It's a card, it's rotating. I kind of sort of hope it gets a rework before it comes back.
All too Blenheim OTK enjoys are in shambles right now.
I saw this card in my collection while I was doing research for the Deep Cuts video, and I literally had forgotten this card exists in the game. Like, it's one of like 2 cards which I saw in my collection and was like, I genuinely did not remember this existed.
Yeah, I have to say, I actually did, as with my reputation, I did feel a pang of guilt when I had to go and reread this card, because it feels like I have done you wrong, Blenheim, but so long, farewell, maybe you'll come back in a more memorable way, and if you are one of the 2 Blenheim OTK enjoyers that Core apparently knows, do leave us a comment, because interaction is good. Right. Blenheim done. On to the A34 Comet. This is another British elite leaving us. This is the 6 cost, 2 op cost, 6/6 heavy armor, 1 tank, which has, when this unit deals damage to enemy HQ, draw a card. It's a big body. I don't think I've ever done anything interesting with it, but someone probably has somewhere.
I mean, no. It's just one of those cards that has always been, I feel like, in the conversation of what cards, like what unplayable elites should be reworked to be interesting and playable. But unlike other terrible cards that did eventually get changes, like Wellington or the Parachute Brigade for Britain, um, the Comet is just good enough in theory.
Yeah.
I feel like if Comet was like a limited card, people would be telling new players to craft Comet in the British decks because it's just fine. The 6 cost 6/6 heavy armor 1 is a good body, and conditional draw is good. It's just it is an elite, and it is not good enough to see play in tier 1 decks, which just makes it depressing because it's not a card you want to open from a pack if you're looking for very good elites. And yeah, anytime you're like flipping through your collection, you're not just like, do I want a 6 cost 6/6 tank in a Britain deck? That's largely vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
Core, have you even really done anything or been around Comet in any length? Because it's one of those cards that tends to just sit quietly in a corner.
I've picked it in draft a few times, and it's insane in
Yeah.
draft. But
Yep.
in actual constructed play, it's too slow. Like you're playing Britain, you're not going to control the front line, which means this is not going to draw you a card like on turn 7 when you can actually operate it. So like you're waiting a number of turns before this can even potentially draw you a card, and by then it's likely been traded out or removed by an order. So it's just you play it, your opponent burns a hammer on it, and then that's kind of it.
Yeah, it might eat some
Yeah.
removal. Seems
I
fair.
feel like you could make it like one operation cost 5/7. And like
Yeah.
it probably wouldn't see played, but it would be like just so much better.
I mean,
Yeah, the Churchill stats.
it would feel substantially more like an elite. I'll give it that much. If you that's always been my big thing with Comet, is it just doesn't feel like an elite.
Yeah, I mean, this card is from Classic, and card draw in Classic was much more restrained. But there's just so many like specials and limiteds that have been released with like similar or better card text um, in the years that have followed. Um, really the only interaction I've had with Comet is new players being confused and thinking about Comet the tank when people are talking about Comet the German fighter
Yes.
in the Discord.
Yes. Right, fair enough. Comet, thank you very much for your service. Another card I'm not gonna lie, I really kind of don't know a lot about. This is Green Howards. This is the 4-cost, 1-op cost, 3/6 guard. It has draw a card when a unit becomes veteran, and honestly, for reasons surpassing my understanding, it's a special. It's it's not like it has bad stats, but Britain not super famous for its veteran synergy. Yeah, I don't know. I have never done anything with this card, and I don't think I've ever seen it actually. I cannot remember ever having seen it see play against me.
The important thing to know with this is it's actually not a bad card. It's really conditional. The important thing with this is that it's symmetrical. So you draw a card if your opponent's units become veteran as well, which means in metagames where there's a lot of veteran units running around, it becomes like substantially better. Like again in a point where I like looked at it was towards the end of Blood and Iron when the Soviet self-damage deck was running around where they were running guards mechanized the whole time. It was okay in that matchup because it was a decently statted guard that blocked, like it didn't die to the SU, and it would frequently draw you a card or two. But like, it was so reliant on your opponent bringing veteran because you didn't really have any veterans you wanted to run in Britain main, so it was really dependent on metagame and like your opponent's deck.
So I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I'm fairly positive that I've brought this card to OCCs when it came out, like probably several. And I don't think I was alone in that. And that was because this card came out in Brothers in Arms, which was the expansion that had the first rotation, and they rotated Seaforth guards, which had been a staple in every single British control deck since it got released. And people were like, well, what do you put in to replace Seaforth guards? Because there is now a hole in the deck for a relatively early guard that you play. And Green Howards is a 3/6, was just like, I mean, it's -1/-1 from Seaforth, which is obviously really big nerf, but what's the alternative? So people just ran Green Howards as a 4-cost 3/6 guard in German control, and there was a fair amount, or in Britain control, and there was a fair amount of Britain control going around because of this guard. And there was just enough veteran in the meta because Brothers in Arms just came out, so people were playing Pathfinders and Shoots in every deck. That like it occasionally drew you cards, and yeah, it was just good enough. Issue is Britain control fell off a cliff, and then the next set they brought back, they reworked Cromwell to just be a better 4-cost guard. So
Yeah. That's fair. Okie dokie. So, Green Howard's gone. All right. Number 9, Commando. This is going to be quick, I think, for a different reason, because this is just... Man, this card, for what it is so powerful, and I'll get into that in a sec. So, number 9, Commandos, if you're not familiar, and you probably are, certainly if you've ever played against me on Brit Air, you're familiar, is a 1-cost, 1-op cost, 1/1 infantry. It's a standard card. And none of that really matters, because what matters is that it says deployment. Set the defense of target enemy unit to 1. I have absolutely abused the life out of this card with both actual onboard bombers and the albacore or the shark in Brit Air. It's been used extensively in various commando decks where you're firing pings around. It is very hard to properly explain how bad it feels when you have your ultimate win condition that cannot possibly be answered by random orders or anything like that on board, and then someone drops a number 9 commando, pops its defense to 1, and everything you thought you'd covered doesn't matter anymore. And even as someone who played the life out of this card, am I sorry to see it go? Honestly, no, because it was just too good for a standard card. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having something that is a potent tool for creating combo removal, but there are times at which this card was frankly insane. JKing, I know you've also played around with this card in your time.
yeah, I remember when like talking about this card when it was announced. I think my feedback, or not feedback about the card, but like my review of the card was that this is a unique effect in Britain because Britain's national identity, like its weakness as a national identity, was single target hard removal, and this is a standard single target hard removal that is incredibly cheap and very easy to use in combination with any other card. So I remember reviewing it and be like, the effect of this card is absolutely insane, but it doesn't draw, and the unit is completely useless. So it's going to be only as good as you can effectively replace its slot in your hand, because especially like if you're using this in combination with a second card that doesn't replace itself to remove a single card, you're just kind of going down on card advantage. And what I didn't account for at the time was just playing Baker Street Irregulars in control with number 9 commandos. That largely replaces it and also can generate more number 9 commandos. And yeah, it's just a really powerful card and an effect that is questionable that Britain should have, especially on a standard body that has all these synergies. And I'm not going to miss it at all.
Oh, would you like to be the defender of number 9 commando at all?
I would not. As everyone knows, I am the most outspoken hater of Crossfire at the moment, and this card is one of the big reasons why I hate Crossfire so much at the moment. We had this effect in Legends, and we had to pay 3 for it, and we were happy to pay 3 for it. This is such a powerful line of text on like any cheap unit, because it's just, as JKing said, it's just hard removal. It's just 1 credit hard removal. You just combo it with literally anything. And as you mentioned, like this just giving you a free opportunity for crossfire is so absurd. Partially one of the reasons that like the Brit Germany and Germany Britain control decks were so good during like Blood and Iron and United Fronts, and partially the reason why Handlock was like playable at the start of naval warfare. Yeah, this card, I'm so glad to see the back of this card. It's so insane.
Yep.
I remember like advocating that this card should be nerfed to like a 2-credit 1/2 or 2-credit 2/1 or something like that. So
yeah.
at its peak of play, and its play rate has dropped, as Britain's play rate more broadly has dropped since then. But like, I still wouldn't have been against him nerfing this card, especially if it was going to stay in the pool for a long time. But getting rotated in his current version is totally fine.
Yep. I think it kind of works for all of us. Okay, so this is the QF 40mm Mark III. This is a standard British artillery. It's 3 cost, 1 op cost. It is a 1/2 artillery with blitz, which is not common on artillery, and has deployment. Duplicate this unit if you have damaged the enemy HQ this turn. Personal confession, which was visible on a number of streams when this thing was around for a bit. I have played around with trying to make this good. I've had a couple of really entertaining, successful moments with it, and an infinite number of times when everything I wanted to do with it just didn't work. It's an interesting idea that really never took off and kind of had the potential to be ridiculous because, as many of you may not actually know, I have often been known to say that the day this game gets even more wild than crazy commandos is when we get truly overpowered artillery, because artillery is comfortably the most powerful unit type in this game. But I don't know. I'm not sure this is a massively impactful rotation, but at the same time, depending on what might be kind of coming down in the future, there is always the chance for this card to suddenly be part of something appallingly degenerate that makes everyone miserable. And for that reason alone, I'm kind of okay with seeing it put in a corner. JKing, you seem to have a thoughtful face.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about this card. I think its position when it came out was to support the 1 attack British deck, which was like a weird archetype that they were trying to push for Britain in Brothers in Arms that really went absolutely nowhere. And I think most of us have probably forgotten which is something that they even tried to push. And yeah, that sucked. This card is just too expensive. But as you mentioned, if there's a way to break this card, it has to, like if credits is not a question and there's cheap attack buffs, this card can get crazy. But thankfully, 1939 is relatively good at, not granting infinite credit combos.
Cool. Anything to add?
I will say I have actually played with this card quite a bit. This card and the next card together in the same deck have resulted in some very, very silly game states. Just blowing people up out of nowhere with with like 7 attack QF40s. So yeah, I'm sad to see it go because it's just a silly card, not particularly playable. But I do agree that if this is one of those cards that's kind of like waiting to get broken. So probably safe just to nip it in the bud and get rid of it because it is like 1-up blitz artillery is like pretty solid.
Yeah.
I'll also say there's a big number of cards in this game which would be so much better if they were not limited board spaces. Like if this was like Magic and you could just have as big of a board you want. Just because, like as you mentioned, like the SDF, the next card we're going to be looking at, it's just very difficult to like with this being 2 cards in your support line.
Yeah.
And you also need cards already on board to trigger this and to buff this. It's like, I don't know, there's just not space for that, especially in Britain.
Gets kind of awkward. Speaking of the SDF, here we have the SDF. I am sad because it's my war mule. The SDF is the 2 cost, 1 op cost, 1 for British special infantry. And it just says your other units have +1 attack for each of your guard units. This card was hooked with so many times. because it does beg the attempt to break it. Because it can, as Core has said, result in some fairly silly board states. Because it's surprising the amount of guards you can find if you're British, and +1 attack is not nothing, especially if you can get it on something, and a global +1 to all of your units is pretty huge. Did it ever massively take off? No. Have I personally tried to build decks around this? Yeah, 100%. I mean, come on, it's a mule. But all I wanted was a deck whereby the mule hit the table and my opponent quit, but it never quite got there. I don't know. I think this is probably in need of some kind of a rework. It just feels a bit too clunky for its own good, especially as JKing was saying, with board space being a limited resource in this game. I don't know. It just doesn't feel amazing. I don't think it's going to change anything. I guess my thought on it is it's a fine rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't fully forget that this card existed, but this card was not anywhere in the front of my mind. There was just other stuff going on in Winter Warfare when this card came out, and I never really saw it see play until like a couple of weeks ago. I played against somebody with like Oxford and Plan West and stuff with SDF, and they just hit like a perfect curve and did some truly crazy stuff. And I'm like, that card's insane. How have I never like thought of this card before? And then I proceeded to forget about the card, and now it's being rotated.
Core, have you done any sort of a mule manipulation, as it were?
Well, funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago, I played a Brit-Polish guard deck on stream with SDF, Oxford, and Plan West. So yeah, I have played on SDF. It's a very funny card. It can do some very funny things, but it's not good. It's too slow. The stats are bad. It doesn't affect itself, so it doesn't trade up. So yeah, it's one of those like really fun, interesting cards, just not good.
Yeah,
I mean, if this was like a Japanese card, would it be like run in Japan, Poland legions? Like if this is a Japanese card,
yeah,
it's
I
gonna go
think.
crazy.
Especially if, I mean, Lord, it's worse, yeah, if it targeted itself and was a Japanese card. I think this would 100% be included in every Japan Poland Legions card. But yeah, it's got potential, it's fun, but it's gone, and I don't think anyone's going to massively miss it. I can keep the tempo up now. Here's a card which a number of people may miss, because this card has history. This is the Sexton. This is the 5-cost, 2-op cost, 3/4 British elite artillery, which has a fairly potent effect. It has deployment, pin an enemy unit. At the start of your turn, pin that unit again. This is the Infinipin. In a world with suppress, it has become a lot less powerful. I will say that. However, when I first started playing this game and first started climbing, this was a go-to elite in many decks that I played, because dang, this effect is crippling if you use it well. I have beaten some very good players. Hi, if you're out there, by the way. In my early days in this game, when I was still try-harding to actually compete. And often this was a pivotal card in doing so. I'm gonna let Core go first, because I suspect JKing may too have some Sexton memories. Core, how do you feel about Sexton heading off to the retirement home for a while?
This is a very big hit to brick control, just in general. Sexton's still like one of the best elites in the deck, in my humble opinion. Particularly like when you combine this with Cromwell, just the ability to lock something down permanently or get the one-off suppress on it. Usually it doesn't matter if this gets suppressed itself, because it's still locking the unit up for a turn. So you're still developing a 3/4 artillery, locking your opponent up from doing from using one of their units. It's I don't know. This is like, it's such an impactful elite in like a neutral board state or like on an even board state, even from behind. If it's like an infantry board state, it's like earlier today I was playing against a US Italy deck. just dropped Sexton, locked up an 8/8 Rangers in the front line. They just couldn't do anything for like 3 turns. So yeah, this this is a really big hit to control. I'm hoping we get something good to replace it, because we cannot afford to be losing like at the handful of good tools that Brick Control actually has right now.
JKing, I know you
Yeah.
also have played this card a chunk.
Yeah, Britain. I mean, Sexton used to be one of the what was like considered one of the best elites in the game. You would run it in Brit Air, which is something that's definitely fallen off in popularity in the last couple of years, just because there's so many more tools available to Britain. But you just like put this into literally every single British deck because it was just so good, and card removal was so limited. Like it just stuck in the days with like everything having like a 4 attack, like with so many 4 attack fight stuff everywhere, and like every single deck having removal, it dies to command failure. It's definitely felt less impactful as the years have gone on, as it's just been kind of outclassed. But it's one of the few artilleries that have remained in the meta. And with the rotation of this and the QF, Britain's actually going down to just 3 artilleries left in standard. They really seem to just be rotating this unit type much more than they are bringing it back or bringing new versions of it. But the one other thing I want to say about Section is the sort of original power creep meme. Not even power creep since Section came out first, but like the original like disparity between the power levels of rarities. With Sexton with medium gun, there was a lot of Sexton medium gun memes going around in 2020. And for those who don't know, medium gun is a 6 credit 3/3 artillery with deployment pin an enemy unit. End of text.
Yeah.
So you spend more, you get less stats, and also the effect is only once compared to Sexton. So yeah, I have many fun medium gun Sexton memes in my head, but I hope Sexton comes back. It's a very iconic card that I think only gets worse with time, not better with time.
Yeah.
Unlike certain cards, like problematic cards. I hope it's a short-lived time in the reserve pool.
Yeah, hopefully so. It was definitely one of the first elites I ever crafted. Right, speaking of elites that I crafted, this is the Wellington. So this is the 7-cost, 3-op cost British elite bomber. It's 4/3 and it has blitz, and it has, if in your hand, this unit costs 2 less for each time you give an order. This has been an unbelievably potent staple in Brit Air for as long as I can remember. This is an incredibly good card in a deck that is going to run orders. I am not going to lie, I am legitimately sad to say goodbye to Wellington, because Wellington has probably been one of the most played cards in my entire history in this game. I am very sad to see it go, but you know, Brit Air will survive in some form or another. And I know some people had perhaps stopped running this. I don't think I had ever stopped running this in Brit Air, because I'm sorry, if you can get this down to 1 or 0 cost, it's insane. But yeah, I'm going to miss this card. JKing, I suspect you may also have some history with this card.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly run through Wellington's balance history, because Wellington got released as one of the worst cards, one of the worst elites ever printed. It was 8 cost for, I think it was a 5/4, and it costs 2 less to deploy this turn. It costs 2 less to deploy for each order you have played this turn. It also didn't have blitz. So if you played 4 orders in one turn with this in your hand, you got to play down a 5/4 bomber. Vanilla. Yeah, it was absolutely atrocious. And then the best deck at the time was Brit Air. And then it decided to rework Wellington to a version similar to its current version, and also gave it Blitz. And it was like, oh, you just took one of the worst cards ever printed and then made it an auto-include in the best deck in the game. That was an incredible choice from the balance team. And yeah, it has just remained a staple in pretty much every British deck since then. But it has started to fall off in popularity in the last year or so with power creep of other cards. And yeah, now it's going away. I don't really have a lot of opinions about the card in general. I just remember the anger of everyone asking for a nerf to Brit Air, and instead we got a buff to Brit Air.
It's fair. Cool. What about you? You a Wellington lover?
Yeah, I'm upset to see this go. This is like one of the last remaining, at least for me, auto-include elites for Britain, like next to Monty. Like if you're playing Britain and you're playing any number of orders, there's more than likely like there should be a Wellington in your deck. I played this in Commandos, I played this in buffs, like any like order heavy deck, played in control, handlock, whatever. It's just one of those like it's one of the few closing options that slower British decks have access to. Also like a fine piece of removal against other slower decks where you're like, oh, I'll just drop this for 2 credits and I'll remove their shoots and whatever. It's yeah. I don't know. I'm just sad to see another like impactful elite go from a nation that's already struggling quite badly.
Yeah,
I
I
feel
mean,
like there was a number of worse elites they could have gotten rid of.
here's hoping Britain does see some good elites in the expansion, because it does feel a bit heavy. Right, only 2 more to go. We're almost through Britain.
I'll just throw an example of a worse elite they could have gotten out there. The number 43 elite Commando, considering that they rotated Baker Street Irregulars and Infiltrate.
Yeah, no, I 100% would have preferred to see that choice. That could definitely have gone, and we could have kept our Wellington. So, moving on to the British Blackburn Skua Mark II. This is a British limited bomber. It's 4 cost, 2 op cost, 2/2 deployment, deal 1 damage to an enemy. If the enemy is a unit, pin it. This is such an indifferent card. I have used this card when I have been looking for a point of ping for my number 9 Commando in Brit Air, and I've been pulling this off of Sea Embargo, and I didn't see anything else. But honestly, that's about the only time I've made use of what is frankly a relatively indifferent card. Unless anyone else has a lot to add, I think this will be a relatively quick one, but I'm curious as to whether anyone's got any like particular attachment to this card in a way that I've missed. But for me, it's always been kind of, it exists.
Yeah, for me, this and the next card are both relegated to the exact same thing of I take this off Sea Embargo when there's no better choices. That's my entire play experience with this card and the next card.
Yeah, and it's also very rare for it to be there to be no better choices, because these are like the cards that come to mind when I think of what is the worst thing you can get off of CM. There's times where you have to pick it because it's like, oh, I need 1 damage, and it's like Swordfish, Gladiator, Skua, or something. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this guy.
That's legit. And yeah, so moving on. I think Core has pretty much already summarized it. This is Vildebeest. Vildebeest, aside from having a cool name, is the 2 cost, 1 op cost special British bomber. It's a 1/2 bomber, and it has, when a friendly unit deals 1 combat damage, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ. Now, in principle, this would have been one of those cards that could have made the 1 damage deck really interesting and done some wild stuff, but I've never known it actually do so. I really have never. I did try this with the QF 40 mil and some other shenanigans at one point for my sins. It wasn't very good, but I did try it. But ultimately, I think it's just one of those cards that just isn't doing anything right now. Core and I have both kind of already said our piece on this, I think. JKing, have you got anything particular to add about the Vildebeest?
Absolutely not. The Vildebeest and the archetype around it is just further evidence that Weapons of Nine was the worst expansion ever made.
Yep, I mean, that's fair.
I will say one thing about the Vildebeest.
Yeah.
The biggest issue with the Vildebeest was that it only triggered off combat damage, which meant if you were just going face, you never got the 2 damage, which is
true.
why it was unplayable.
I think Vildebeest might be the introduction of combat damage as a keyword, or at the very least, the on a card that sees like any play. I do remember Vildebeest coming out, and a lot of people being very confused about that. And obviously, since then, with like fight and other stuff,
Yeah.
combat damage has become much more relevant of a term.